Vegeta is renowned for getting stronger in his own way. Now that he has another chance to do so, is it already too late? Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now for any Vegeta fan out there, for the most part throughout Dragon Ball, it's been very much their boy being the second fiddle to Goku and constantly vowing to get stronger than him in some shape or form someday. Usually off screen. You know, like the time I went Super Saiyan and I really wanted it. However, things might be starting to change, and it might be giving the Prince of All Saiyans some brand new development that could finally see him break away from his iconic tropes of decades and into something more in keeping with his persona from those 3 last episodes of Z. But will it matter? Let's discuss that. So, Ultra Instinct. You remember the heady glory days of late 2017 when this technique was very much the hotness of the day? All of that build-up that Whis and Beerus have been making about their training ending at some point with this brand of key? Well, it sure enough came about and showed that anybody with the right training could do it. It wasn't Saiyan exclusive. But nowadays, it is effectively Saiyan exclusive. And most annoyingly Goku exclusive. Much to our chagrin, this once universal power, in theory, has become very much a Goku thing, as he has found a certain understanding of the angels and their training methods because, to be fair, he is quite a prodigious fighter when it comes up to this. He has a brand new ranking of power to aspire to, and his goal of fighting those stronger than him and believing that there will always be people stronger than him will essentially never be exhausted for as long as he now lives. But of course, in an ironic twist of fate, even though he is the only mortal being alive today that has managed to master Ultra Instinct, he is still technically the weakest being that has been granted this power in existence. It's still amazingly strong, there's plenty to get here. Arguably, however, even the artificially boosted Moro was stronger than Goku now, but he just couldn't contain the power that he took from Beerus, which came so naturally to Goku. Only by observing the Ram Man's slow descent into simple-mindedness did the Saiyan realize the enormity of the energy he had been training in. You know, it's a matter of perspective, really. Right. We've talked about Goku's situation long enough for this video, because something is developing. It turns out that his best buddy and rival won't need to mimic him after all. He won't need to get Ultra Instinct too, something we've been trying to tell you for many years. He won't be. Instead of simply refining Super Saiyan Blue evolution, Beerus has opened some new possibilities for Vegeta. Despite the Prince voicing his reluctance to become the next God should Beerus choose to retire, but he's still going down that path anyway. And while the Tournament of Power era, especially in the anime, had framed Ultra Instinct as being the new ultimate big thing, we know that that hasn't been quite the case. It was pretty effective when it was used, but when you boil it all down, Goku couldn't reliably call on it in that arc. He only now can, sort of. It just happened back then. Meanwhile, Vegeta had pulled all of his efforts into a better version of Super Saiyan Blue, despite the ridiculous bloom effects for the TV version where you couldn't really even see him. And in the contest right there and then, at the end of Super, Vegeta was the stronger of the two. But now, he could take it one step further seemingly into a whole other branch. So, let's look at the techniques before we get into the meat and potatoes of the gods and ask ourselves, what can Vegeta learn from the cat? Because in our honest opinion, Hakai is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so let's start at the beginning for this avenue of power. We have ourselves an angel, a Kai, and a god of destruction. Together, in each universe within the Dragon World reality, these 3 powers are connected to the universal balance, as all of them have their set roles and sets of powers. After all, Beerus says that creation and destruction work together. They cannot exist separately, and that is something he takes very great pride in. He is very good at the destruction part. But before we get into that chestnut, that is Beerus and the other GODs, let's have a look at the arsenal of the other divine beings for perspective's sake, so we can have a comparison to go with. Some of the movesets that we might be more familiar with, but don't have much more instant recall on. We shall start with the Supreme Kais, as they are arguably the first of the high-end divine beings we've been introduced to, and in my opinion, the remnants of creation left over by the existence of Zalama, right at the beginning of the universe. But don't you worry here, our tin hats are staying off for this one. When we think of the Supreme Kais, we of course remember instantaneous movements as being one of their signature techniques, which is an even better version of instant transmission that Goku, and now apparently Vegeta, use, as it doesn't require the user to focus on a specific energy signature to use as a target. Supreme Kais can go wherever they want, giving them the ability in theory to appear almost anywhere, within or even outside the universe without pause. You see Shin using this to great effect in Super Dragon Ball Heroes, where he somehow grew a spine. However, this isn't wholly exclusive to beings that resemble the likes of Shin or Zamasu actually. It seems that beings further down the pecking order can actually use too, sort of. Because curiously, we have seen Kami do this in the early portion of Z, further emphasizing that his powers might be connected to the Supreme Kais, maybe granted to him even. Yes, we know that not all planets have guardians like Kami, but in the end, Kami answers to King Kai, who in turn answers to the Supreme Kai. We don't count the Grand Kai, not just because he's anime only, but because he does his own thing, man. Like we say, it's suggested that Kami may have been granted this power to do his job effectively, but perhaps only within a certain limit. Like, maybe a lower level of this technique, not as far into a different universe or something, but this is conjecture at this point. We also do know that Kid Buu has managed to learn how to mimic this technique, which could be the first clue we are going that this half of Buu was the one that inherited the God Key from the Grand Supreme Kai, way back in Z, before God Key was probably even thought of. Instead of being an entity of pure chaos who would not think to be strategic or even caring of what power he got from his dinner, it turns out that he does. Nice little detail we got going there. Another power that was connected to the Grand Supreme Kai is a very curious one. It's not fully obvious, but once it becomes clear to you, it's a power that is not only useful, but also rather fitting for a being such as the Grand Supreme Kai. You know, if you take this even higher, you get to the GP. The technique's called Kai Kai Matoru, and basically, it can seal an opponent's magic power wholesale. Is it permanent? Well, I mean, you can't make it too broken, otherwise there'd be no peril. You just ask the Supreme Kai to go and seal away every magical being and you'd be able to just go off and have tea. Yes, this power is temporary, but that temporary period is relative to Kais and not relative to mortals, because hey, if the expiration date is millions of years, as it was the case for the likes of Moro, it's still pretty useful. For us mortals, it's as good as permanent. The last notable mention is a package that seems to come with the Supreme Kais again. These are telepathy, telekinesis, and healing. And again, some of them seem to be connected to both Namekians and Kami himself, emphasizing the divine potential of the Namekians even further, but fear not, we're not going to be making yet another video about Namek and its people, so let's have a quick rundown of the Angels instead. Aside from being able to do, well, everything that the plot requires them to do, the most obvious one is Autonomous Ultra Instinct. Just kidding, we know it's all called Ultra Instinct Sign really, as Angels are always in that state, though allegedly they are able to turn it off apparently, if they so choose. But there is no real need for them to do so, so what's the point? And obviously the GP is the absolute pinnacle of using this, since he is the head honcho of all the angelic beings in this portion of reality. Angels are also even more adept at warping reality, as they can move not only in space, but also in time. To a degree of course, just a few minutes. You don't want to make it too broken, as we've seen during a certain fateful moment of Resurrection F. Now, is there a limit to angelic powers? Well, in theory, no. And that is intentional. I've stated many times over the years that Angel's scope of power is limitless, essentially, because it's convenient for the plot to be that way. Because if you were to tie down Whis' capabilities and give him a hard and fast moveset and limit for powers, you'd be held back doing really crazy stuff. Also, you remove some level of mystery from the Angel and the Cat, and you wouldn't want to do that. There is a need for mystique when it comes to these two. We should not know everything about them, as they are a wholly different type of being to us, and we could never fully comprehend them anyway because they're not mortal. By only offering glimpses of Whis' powers, like with teleportation, time do-overs, as well as giving birth cleanly to Bulla, you add a whole level of intrigue and amazement in what Whis can do, and what you think he could do. It's limitless. But as you know with Beerus, you can't just go to town with these powers, they need to be used altruistically, and within reason or defense, because if you don't and you choose to use it to attack people, it's time for you to be swiped clean away by the cosmos. That's where Beerus comes in, and that's where he knows he is far more superior. He can do what he wants without penalty seemingly from the cosmos, if he chooses to use it in combat. We have proof. And when it comes to his training with Vegeta, this is the very thing that inspired this whole video. Beerus and his development in this arc already is remarkable, For years, we were actually pretty content to see him as the cantankerous overseer simply of the Saiyans' development, with the occasional need to step in when things got a little bit too hairy and we needed the cat to scare away the pigeons from the figurative back garden. You know, the pigeon being Zamasu for the sake of this analogy. But there is also the dreaded sight of seeing both he and his attendant standing in the wings and potentially wiping away the baddie at any moment should they want to. But then they don't. Yeah, worse, they're a distraction. But now, in the Granola arc, Beerus is stepping up his game and offering something new. He is going to be taking Vegeta under his wing, in his own special way. The same Saga Piccolo school of thought, I reckon. Now, what's he going to be teaching the prince? Well, the most obvious technique seems to be, on first glance, Hakai. Okay, I won't bore you with the deep details of this, as it's basically a disintegration technique. But with many different variants and forms, as we've seen it as an orb, a wave, or a targeted ability. All with the same outcome, obviously. But I doubt Vegeta's training will be limited to just that. Why? Well, in the manga, Goku knows the move too, and used it, sort of, against Zamasu, and this was down to him observing the technique alone. I don't believe that Beerus would only teach Vegeta this, and it being acquired that simply. It wouldn't be as special, nor would it be in keeping with his intentions to Vegeta. He genuinely wants to see the prince move on and develop and improve from his decades-long gripes and break out into something brand new and far more powerful. Beerus cares about Vegeta's being. He wants him to be free from his eternal angst against Frieza. It's all rather poetic if you ask me. What we've learned recently as well is that the gods of destruction can use the Hakai technique with almost surgical precision, as Beerus has managed to only just cut out a small piece of Vegeta's armour, instead of taking out his entire torso and sending the prince into an abyss of nothingness. It's a move which can be scaled to almost a microscopic level. Say you could use Hakai on a small part of a being and incapacitate them. It's a far more methodical means of doing so, and the being wouldn't necessarily know that it's even happened. Beerus brand lobotomies? Okay, even though Beerus taunts Vegeta with the supposed rhetoric that his mind is always going on and on about destruction all the time, he does have enough control over it to not let the feeling overcome him. He knows what he's doing, despite his outward persona of being a maverick. If we look through Beerus' extensive portfolio of moves, they are grand and bombastic. You have such things as the Cataclysmic Orb or the Beerus Ball. They are tools of immense destructive power, and yet the cat uses those heavy hits with the grace of a ballet dancer and can negate it just as quickly as he generated it. In short, these massive techniques do not become more lumbering and cumbersome with scale, like with Frieza's planet-smashing techniques. He's actually kind of clumsy when you compare him to Beerus. So, in our opinion, the thing that the cat shows Vegeta is not Hakai itself, but the absolute control over thoughts and actions. He is going to show the prince far more than just a simple move. He's going to be teaching him a whole new means of thinking. Beerus can switch from hot to cold anytime he wants, without spending ages powering up or screaming your head off. Sort of like Ultra Instinct, but just in the cat's own special way. Now yeah, Vegeta can keep his cool most of the time, but if you wound his pride even just by a little bit, even these days, he loses his cool and resorts to rage. And at this level of power, when you're going up against the angelic elite, relying on rage doesn't cut it anymore. Take a look at the anime-specific destroyer form of Toppo, a thing that may or may not be adapted into the manga at some point in some other shape or form. It comes about from a place of anger, but it is a cold anger, a more meticulous form of ire. A tool of destruction cannot be too passionate, or less it is no longer a tool, but a juggernaut, uncompromising and uncontrollable. This power needs precision at all times, or at least the user needing to be aware of when to turn the passion off. If Kais were meant to empathize with the universe, the GOD are supposed to be emotionally distant from it, with the angels maintaining the balance between the two ways of thinking. Beerus cannot get sentimental or emotional when he's doing his job. Any other time? Yeah, sure, but not when he's at work. In this new arc, he is showing us that he is capable of distinguishing this. And that's why I think Vegeta's power will matter when it comes down to it. Goku's way to power is through trusting his instincts and relying on his body to do the job for the good of the people. But Vegeta, as we've heard way too many times up until this point, overthinks stuff, and he needs to control this or as we are now starting to see, he needs to detach himself from his over-analytical mind. He just needs to do it, you know? Don't think about it, just do it. Don't rely on rage, because that does not work anymore. And at the end of the day, his training with Beerus shows, and will keep on showing us, that you can still do cool stuff with Vegeta. And with him getting back into the student's chair again, maybe just what he needed, so that he can become fresh and embolden his fanbase into thinking that his arc isn't over yet, and that he can still be relevant. What he started on Yardrat with finding some sort of tranquility may end up being upgraded and repurposed by Beerus, who would aid him in finally being at peace with himself, with his inner turmoils, and learning how to control them. The old Vegeta will be put to bed, and in its place, a more stoic and resolute Vegeta, fit for the future of Dragon Ball, where Goku might get emotional or wish to show mercy, even in his mastered Ultra Instinct form, which is meant to be totally devoid of his conscious mind. Vegeta will just do what he needs to do, devoid of personal opinion. If it is his job to finish something off, he will do his job, and not worry about it. This might be the next step in him becoming Chill Vegeta from the end of Z, and we really wish that Beerus' lessons are more than just giving him the ability to zap people, and instead allow us to see more of Beerus and what he can do aside from Hakai. We've seen that already, and yeah, I know zapping's cool, but Vegeta's development is even cooler. So what do you folks think? Do you think this style of training will benefit Vegeta in the long run? Will this new training even matter? And will it be all for naught with Goku somehow finding another power to keep him number one? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!